Okay, so when I was praying yesterday, when trying to prepare something for today, I was kind of drawn to this thing that it's come into my mind a couple of times recently, and this whole thing about pleasing God, kind of. We all want to please God. We want to live lives pleasing to God. And so, this whole question in my own mind is, is my life pleasing to God? Am I, kind of pleasing, are my ways pleasing to Him? And kind of, that whole thing. We know when twice in the Bible when Jesus came out of the river, and later on as the Mount of Transfiguration, I think, just after that, God Himself, God the Father, testifies of Jesus, His Son, how He's well pleased with it. This is my Son, with whom I'm well pleased. So there's always this thing, Lord, are you well pleased, with me, with what, so I thought I would just kind of look at it very quickly, very shortly, because we all want to please God, but in order for us to kind of live right, we need to think right. You see, our mindset, our heart, that's where the issues of life come from. So in order for our lives to please God, we need our thoughts to please God. And I like what the psalmist says in Psalm 19:14, and I'm going to read out of the NIV. So Psalm 19:14, may these words of my mouth, was coming out of my mouth, and this meditation of my heart, it's to do with your mind, your mindset. What are you thinking? What are you meditating on? What are you kind of developing in your heart, in your imagination? Because thoughts come in as a seed, and then we develop them. You see, like a picture in the olden days, I've seen how they would do that. You take a picture, and then you take the film in the dark, and under that UV or red, infrared, whatever lights, and it would develop. So that's what's happening in our hearts. There are thoughts, there are things, there are issues that they are being developed in our hearts slowly. So, may the words, and we know that the mouth speaks out of the abundance of our hearts. So, out of that meditation of our hearts kind of dictates what eventually is going to come out of our mouths. So, the psalmist says, may these words of my mouth and this meditation of my heart be pleasing. And many other versions say acceptable. So pleasing or acceptable in your sight, Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So it's almost this prayer, is what happens, sometimes in my own heart, in my own mind. It's like, Lord, is what's happening in my mind, these thoughts, these things, this was coming out of my mouth, pleasing to you? Is it acceptable unto you and to your sight? So what comes out of our mouths and what we're thinking in our minds needs to be pleasing in His sight. Now, why is it so important for the meditation of our hearts, our thoughts, and the words of our mouths to be pleasing to God? Because ultimately our thoughts and again I'm going to use these words interchangeably, our thoughts or our meditation of our hearts and the words of our mouths will determine where we end up. You see, they're like a steering wheel for our lives. The meditation and the words of our mouth. So they kind of lead us, determine the course, the way. So the question is then, is our mindset pleasing to God? Is the way we think pleasing to God? And this is, today I just want to make 2 points really. This is the first one, which is kind of obvious, is for us to, over the next week or over the next few, whatever, just to think, and ask ourselves, is what is going on? Because sometimes we can, we can think, yeah, this is good. This is good. What I'm thinking, this is, it's not harming, it's whatever, this is good. But there's a difference between this is good and this is pleasing to God, you see? So, many people is like, yeah, this is positive thoughts, positive thinking, positive, whatever, but is that pleasing to God? So that is the question that I want us to kind of go to God with. But in Romans 8:8 says, so then, those who are in the flesh cannot please God. So we want to please God. I want to please God. I want, Him to be pleased with me. But if I'm in the flesh, then I cannot. It's literally impossible for me to please God. Now, what does it mean? What's the context around this verse? And if you read Romans 8, like from verse 5 to 7, which is the previous 3 verses before verse 8, you can see that it's talking about the carnal mind. It's talking about the mindset, the way we think, this carnal mind, and it's comparing it with the spiritual mind. So it's trying to make this distinction between, carnal thinking, carnal way of seeing things, this fleshly way, this flesh mindset, and the spiritual one. So now, if we meditate according to the flesh, in other words, what is possible, and in the natural, what I can do in my own strength, what I can see, what I can touch, then I don't need faith. Faith is not required. For a natural mind, faith is not required. Faith doesn't make sense, you see. But for a spiritual mind, if I put in like, hey, what's impossible for God? What can I do through God? What can God do through me? What is, then all of a sudden I need faith. You see, for me to see that, I need faith. Faith is required. So the dividing factor between the 2 types of meditations in our heart is faith. Faith kind of separates the 2. And so in Hebrews 11 verse 6 says, but without faith it is impossible to please Him. So without faith it's impossible to please Him. You cannot please Him. So that's why, let my meditation be acceptable to you, God, is, well, the only way it's going to be pleasing to Him is if there is faith in there, if there is mixed faith, if it's just natural of, what I can do, what is possible, what I can touch, what I can see, whatever, then it's not going to be pleasing. If there is faith in there, or at least if faith is required, then we're on the right path. So without faith, it's impossible to please God. That's why who are in the flesh, kind of not seeing it from God's perspective, things, they can't please God. So a life lived according to the flesh is not pleasing to God. But a life lived according to the Spirit, in other words, what God sees, what can be achieved through God, what can God do in my life or through me or whatever, that is more pleasing. So faith is the dividing factor. Now, the first question that I want us to think about in the week ahead is, kind of what is happening in my heart? What are my thoughts? What the way I'm thinking and what is coming out of my mouth? Is that pleasing? Now, for us to understand that, the question back is, okay, so how do I know? How do I know that the meditation of my heart and what's coming out of my mouth is pleasing to God? How do I know that? There's only one clear answer to this, and this is, is it God's will? So we're coming to God's will. Is it God's will or not? Is my thinking in line with His will? So Colossians 1, 9 to 10 says this. Colossians 1, 9 to 10. Because without us knowing His will, we cannot please Him. We can't please Him. So it's important for us to know His will and then meditate in our heart His will and have His will come out of our mouths. You see? That's when the whole thing becomes really pleasing to God. So Colossians 1, 9 to 10. For this reason, since the day we heard about you, we have not stopped praying for you. We continually ask God to fill you with what? With the knowledge of His will. So these guys are interceding for the Colossians, for this church in Colossus, and this is their prayer of intercession. This is the key point that they are praying. That God would fill them with the knowledge of His will. It's like, God, just fill them with, may they know your will. We just pray that they would know your will. Through all the wisdom and the understanding that the Spirit gives. And now verse 10 starts, so that. Now what's the point? You could say, okay, yeah, we're praying that they would know His will. Well, what's the point? That they would know His will. So that you, the Colossians, may live a life worthy of the Lord and please Him. You see? So that their lives would be pleasing to Him, to God. And look, it says in every way. You see, our lives sometimes can be pleasing and to God in this way, but other areas of our lives may not be pleasing, you see. God may be pleased with this here, but over here He may need work. Over here we may need to improve. Over there we need to think about it. So that we may please Him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God. You see, so the accent here, I just want to kind of look at this verse just a little bit, and this will be the last point for today. So that. Now, we looked at the reason that we need to know His will is so that we may be able to please Him, so that it will affect our lives. Now, God reveals His will to us in two ways, and this is kind of I'm kind of approaching the second point that I'm trying to make today. So, how do we learn God's will? There are two ways: through the Bible and through revelation. So we go to the Bible and we read, oh, his will is that I live this way, his will is that this, whatever. And then through revelation, for particular points in time, for particular decisions, God may choose, if his will is not revealed in the Bible for that particular thing, he will come and say, do this. He will reveal his will for any particular moment. So, for example, when I wanted Natasha to be involved in the business, and she was on the payroll, and she was a director in the company, and she was doing, accounts and whatever, I had a voice, in my spirit just rise up, that stopped me in my track, saying, let Natasha go. Let her go. Get out of the business. Now, that was him revealing his will for that moment in time, for that situation. And I kind of argued with it. I didn't listen. I said, well, why is that? I kind of, didn't listen to it, and then things happened and whatever. So he reveals his will through revelation if he believes that there is no answer for it in the Bible, or if the thing is really, really serious. Now, so he reveals his will in two ways. Now, what I found is that we consider direct revelation of his will as more important than the Bible. You see, people kind of bypass the Bible and they want to go straight to God and find out his will about everything in their lives directly from him through revelation. You see, that happens a lot. Lord, what about this? What about that? What about? It's kind of it's failing that small test which says, well, how about kind of faithful with what with the will that has already been revealed to you. You see, I've already revealed this. Being faithful with that, but no, sometimes because it's easier, or because we consider that, if God tells me directly, if I receive in a revelation, then, it's kind of more important and about it. So we end up with this whole thing, Father, is this your will? Father, is that your will? Father, what about this? And what about that? And what about everything? And it's just everything through revelation. We just, his will, what's his will? Let's just go and get, just pray and reveal and whatever. Forgetting, now of course, going to the Bible, it takes an effort. You have to actually go to it. You have to actually read it. You have to actually, So, I'm just going to go straight to God, and I'm just going to get it through revelation. And there's a lot of that happening. Only through revelation, directly to the ears, people want to hear what God says. The thing is, the Bible gives us clear instructions about most eventualities in our lives. And so, sometimes, Lord, what do you say about this? What do you say about that? And God said, well, what about what I've already said? What about what I've already said? What are you doing about that? You see, it's like I'm a father and I've got children. So when we go out, my will, what is my perfect will? My will is that my children would be dressed nicely, that they would talk nicely, that they would behave nicely, so that people, when they look at them, they don't say, oh, what parents, When you look at a young child that maybe, whatever, you can find minuses, straight away, what you think about the parents. It's like, the parents. So me as a father, I want people to think good about me. You know, so it's my will that my children would look a certain way, behave in a certain way, and whatever. Now, so when we go out, you know, I want to make a good impression, you know, of who I am as a father. You know, I want people not to think that I'm a bad father. You know, so when they look at my children. Now, what if my children would, you know, okay, so my will is for them to be dressed nicely. If they came to me and it's like, what about these socks? Shall I put these socks? Do I take blue socks? What about these trousers? You know, what is your will? What is your will? Do you want me to wear these trousers or these trousers or this top or that top? Shall I wear a vest or shall I? It's like, my will is for you to be dressed nicely. You know, just get dressed. You know, just through revelation, everything. You know, just tell me, you know, the size of the socks, what color shoes, what color this, what color, you know, just revelate all the time. People want to go through revelation and not look at the Bible and say, you know what, this is what the Bible says, this is already revealed to me. So now, do you see what I mean with this? Because that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make, is not bypassing the Bible. You know, people just want everything through revelation, and it's just God saying, okay, you know, no, this has already been revealed. You know, you're just trying to bypass that. You're not being faithful with what has been revealed already, and you just want everything, you know, direction, and you are calling it intimacy with God. You see, rather than spiritual laziness. You see. You're calling it intimacy with God. So I'm going to bypass the Bible and just go straight to Him. Now, before I finish, because this is kind of my second point, what I want to do is just have a look at this verse again, and then I'll finish with that. So 2 points. The first one is us asking ourselves, is the meditation of my heart and what's coming out of my mouth pleasing to God? So that's the first question. The second question is, am I being faithful with the will of God that has already been revealed? Or am I just trying to bypass it and get every decision in my life figured out through revelation? Because somehow that's more important than what has been revealed already. And the final thing is, what I want us to see in this verse is, in Colossians 1, 9-10, for this reason, since the day we heard about you, we have not stopped praying for you. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of His will. So the first thing is the knowledge of His... The first thing that happens is the knowledge of His will. We know His will. Through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord. Okay? So what comes second? So His will comes first. Second, after this comes a life pleasing to the Lord. Without His will, you can't have the second one. You can't have a life pleasing to the Lord. Now, what happens when you are living a life pleasing to the Lord? The third thing is there are fruits. You are bearing fruit. Okay? Fruit is the third one. And then what happens after that? When you are bearing fruit, what happens through that process of bearing fruit is you are growing in the knowledge of God. You see, not the knowledge about God. Knowledge about God comes first, which is His will. Okay? But then the final thing is knowledge of Him. Yeah, not about Him, but of Him. So first is I know what pleases Him, but the last thing, I know Him. I know Him. You see, but this is the process. You have to know His will, and then that affects your life, really, because the issues of life come out of the heart, you see. So the meditation changes when I know His will. And what comes out of my mouth changes when I know His will. And then my life is transformed and it pleases Him, which then results in fruit, which then ends up me, I know Him, So that's where intimacy happens. As the end, that the whole thing equals intimacy with God, rather than as the very beginning, Lord, what about this, what about that, what about that, what about that, when he said, look, I've already written it, what are you doing about that? You see, be faithful with what you already know. Okay, so yeah, these are kind of the points that I was trying to raise today. So that's that. So we want to please God. We want to live a life, but it will start with the meditation of our hearts, whatever. So, amen.